Welcome, welcome everybody. I'm gonna knock stuff over as we get started. My little wooden guy here. So welcome to the Parents Helping Parents live virtual chapter and webinar meetings. So this is our first one, and I, for one, am really excited. We had to cancel 2 weeks ago because it was nadir season. And it was unavoidable. Everybody said that if we did anything 2 weeks ago on Monday night that we weren't going to survive. So we canceled and stayed home and got a couple ounces of rain. So I want to officially welcome you to the first one. We're really excited that everybody's here. I'm not sitting in front of the controls, but I'm hoping that we're live streaming on Facebook and that everything is working well until I get back over there. So this is our live webinar chat room. We are Parents Helping Parents, and we are a group of volunteers, parents, grandparents, friends, all of someone that we know that is struggling with the disease of addiction or substance use disorder in some way or form. And we've got one mission, and that is just caring parents, offering hope through resources, education, and shared experience. So our virtual chapter is a little bit different from our live in-person meetings because it's all virtual. We're here in front of a camera. There's nobody here with us. You can watch these streamed live on Facebook. If you prefer to watch anonymously, you can do that through a Zoom free live webinar. You can find that link on our website, parentshelpingparents.info, and you can also find that link on our Facebook page at Parents Helping Parents, Inc. So we only have one rule here, and that is what is said here stays here. So feel free to share, ask your questions. We don't point fingers, we don't judge, we just support. Many of us have had some of the same questions that a lot of you that might be watching are having, have lived the same experiences, and very few of us had answers at the time. So we try to listen, we try to share our experiences, and we share the things that we've learned through our journey and share resources with you that we've uncovered. So as an organization, we have no professional expertise. We only have walked the shoes of parents. Our mission is limited to providing information, resources, and peer support. This meeting or any outreach that Parents Helping Parents offers should never be considered a substitute for professional counseling, legal, financial, or medical services. That's not what we do, all of which we recommend if they're appropriate for you and your needs. So in addition to that, we're really excited to bring this virtual meeting. This enables us to reach people in rural communities where we don't already have Parents Helping Parents chapters. It helps us reach people who might not be comfortable stepping out to a live meeting, even in the metro area or in areas where we have a chapter. But we want to encourage you that if it's possible for you to connect with a live chapter, we think you should do that. Nothing beats the in-person support and encouragement of one parent helping another parent. So these live meetings are great, and we're going to continue to do them. But if you can, we want you to hit one of our chapters up. So during the course of tonight's virtual meeting, you've got a chance to ask questions. If you're watching the live stream on Facebook, I'll be monitoring that from Command Central over to my left. I had to think about that for a second. Yeah, you're right, this way. So I'll be monitoring the live chat on Facebook and on Zoom. So on Zoom, you've got options. You can either ask me a direct private question. Nobody else in the Zoom room can see that. Or if you're comfortable, you can ask a question to everyone so that we can keep track of those as well. So if you would like to be on our undisclosed email list, please comment your email address on our Facebook feed or in our Zoom room, and we will make a note of that, and you'll begin to receive our quarterly newsletters. If you'd like to participate as a volunteer, help with meetings, speakers, get trained to answer the Parents Helping Parents helpline, or spread the word about chapters and other opportunities, let us know in comment or chat. We could definitely use your help and your support. After tonight, our next meeting is going to be on June 17th, 2 weeks from tonight at 7 p.m. Stephanie Markham from Life Choice Interventions and her partner are going to be joining us to talk about the power of family and recovery. So please make plans to join us there. Stay in touch with us on Facebook. Follow us there for all that information. Tonight, I am really lucky If you've been following us on Facebook and you've been keeping up with the advertisements, Chris Neal, a friend of mine and a counselor here in Oklahoma City, was going to come and speak to us about resiliency and self-care. And unfortunately, Chris had emergency oral surgery late yesterday afternoon and was not going to be able to speak to a group of people tonight. So we've got him booked for later this fall in September. So he will be back. You will get to hear Chris. But we've got just as good of a you're not a backup plan.
We'll see.
You're not a backup plan, man. So
the jury's still out.
right. So Brian Anderson is joining us tonight. Is it Major or is it formerly Major? Major retired. Major retired Brian Anderson from the U.S. Army, and also program director at Rob's Ranch, a 90-day faith-based, is that how you guys describe it?
It's a 90-day male-only Christ-centered substance abuse treatment facility.
Program director, he'll explain more about that at Rob's Ranch here in Purcell, Oklahoma. They just had their golf tournament today, so Brian's had a long day, but he's going to bring you a really good word about codependency and the traits of enabling. So I'm going to pass off the microphone to retired Major, and he's going to get us going.
Thanks, Derek.
I got it. Looking sharp, buddy.
All right, thanks. Appreciate it. Well, good evening, everybody. Hey, thank you guys very much for joining in. First of all, I think this is incredibly important. I want to say thank you so much for doing something to help yourself out and to help your family out. It's incredibly important. I think one of the most devastating things about addiction is that it lives in secrecy and it lives in darkness, and it's wrapped in a whole lot of shame. And to have people actually come out and say, you know what, I'm not going to do this alone is one of the most greatest things that an individual can do for themselves. And so I just want to again tell you, thank you guys very much for taking part of this and taking for a few minutes of your time this evening to listen to me. I am Brian Anderson. I am the program director out at Rob's Ranch, which is a substance abuse treatment facility there just outside Purcell, Oklahoma. And tonight I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about codependency and more specifically the trait of enabling that's wrapped up in codependency. And I come at this not only as a clinician, but I also come at this as that I am a recovering alcoholic and drug addict. I wasn't always an active alcoholic and drug addict. Mine started what we call an iotrogenic addiction, and all that means is I had some significant injuries that occurred my last couple of years in the military, and it required a lot of surgeries. I had some spinal cord damage. I was temporarily paralyzed in a wheelchair. I had to learn how to walk again. But all along through that whole process, as the Army and the doctors were trying to help me, they were pushing a lot of pain medication to me. And I found out that not only did the pain medication help my physical pain, but more importantly, it helped my emotional pain, took that away from what I experienced in combat. And so my addiction started later in life. But regardless, it was still just as devastating to me and just as devastating to my wife and my 3 daughters and to my mother and father, who fortunately are still alive today. And so I come at it from the perspective of being a recovering alcoholic and addict, but also as a clinician. So I hope if any of you guys have any questions at all with anything I say or anything that comes to your mind, please type it in, let Derek know, and I'll do the best I can to answer it. They're absolutely, I sincerely mean this, no stupid question, no dumb question. Our whole goal here is to help people out. So one of the things that I deal with a tremendous amount with when I'm working with my own clients at Rob's Ranch, and then I get an opportunity to deal with their families. Kind of a saying that I have is, behind every alcoholic addict is an enabler, and sometimes a really, really good enabler. Enabling doesn't ever come from the standpoint of view that we're trying to hurt our loved one. Enabling actually comes from the opposite of that, and it comes from we love our loved one, we love our child so much that we're willing to do anything for them. We're willing to absorb the pain. We are willing to remove pain from them. And so enabling comes from a position of love and care and wanting to protect our children. The problem is that enabling never works. And what I tell the families that I work with is that if our enabling would actually work, it would have worked already. And I know some of you guys out there have been doing this for a long time with your loved one, and you're exhausted, and rightfully so. An alcoholic and addict's behaviors is absolutely insane. It talks about it in other literature where it's cunning and baffling. And many of you guys already know this. And if there's anybody out there that is just coming to this for the first time and you're just relatively new to this, we all understand the alcoholic addict's behaviors is unbelievably, and it makes no sense. It literally is irrational insanity. So I just want to make sure that that's clear, is that, enabling does not come from a bad position. It comes from a position of love, care, but there's also a whole lot of other stuff wrapped up into that. One of the things that are wrapped up in it when it comes to codependency is at the crux or the nexus of codependency lies in not necessarily helping the other person as our primary mission. Codependency is about making us, the individual feel better. And so I'll give you an example. Let's say my daughter comes in and says, Dad, can I have, $50 for whatever. Now, I love my daughter and I want to be able to provide for her and give her gifts. But if she has the ability to go out and work and get that $50 for whatever luxury thing that she wants, although it's going to take her a longer time to do it, and although she may get upset, if I was to give her $50, a lot of times that's going to be rooted in, I don't want to feel bad for telling her no. And so I'm going to give her the $50 so I don't feel bad, but I can kind of hide it sometimes in thinking, well, I just want to do something nice for her. Codependency gets real messy and it can get kind of confusing. Again, another reason why being a part of helping parents is such an amazing thing for you guys, because you can talk to each other. Please reach out and talk to each other and bounce things off each other's ideas. So codependency is truly all about, we get our self-worth and we get our self-satisfaction, we get our value, we get our feeling good about ourselves through somebody else. And when it comes to alcoholics and drug addicts, that often looks like enabling. Another piece of that codependency enabling piece that comes in is parents often feel that somehow this is their fault. And I will tell you, none of this is your fault. None of this is your fault. I've had parents that have asked me and said, well, I was abusive to my child growing up, so that's why they're an alcoholic and addict. And I understand that position. But here's something that I learned, because from a personal note, I blamed my 3 tours in combat for my addiction. And I blamed it on PTSD. And I said, well, I became addicted to pain medications and alcohol because I had PTSD because of the war. And that sounds really good that, hey, yeah, that makes sense. Brian's an alcoholic addict because of the war. But here's the problem with that theory. I had many, many other soldiers that I served with who went through the exact same thing. They did the same things I did, were exposed to the same things that I were, and they did not become alcoholic addicts. And so me going through war, me having the PTSD, me being exposed to that trauma was not the cause of me being an alcoholic and addict. It may have been an influencer, it may have been an ingredient into a big pie, but it wasn't the cause. And so I say all that because your child being an alcoholic is not your fault. And I can't emphasize that enough. The disease of addiction is a disease. We have a question, Dirk?
Yeah, we had somebody that was curious if you could give a more detailed definition of what enabling is.
So the question was, can I give a more detailed definition of enabling? So let me give you some, if it's okay, I'll give you some real world examples. And I see this quite a bit. And this happens very, very frequently with drug addicts and alcoholics. I'll get a phone call from a parent that says, hey, my son or my daughter just got thrown in jail for possession of whatever substance, and they want me to go bail them out. And I almost always, especially if they've done this more than once, I will tell the parent, don't bail them out. Let them sit there in jail. And I will turn right around and the very next day hear that the parent went and bailed them out. Now, if I go and I ask the parent, why did you go bail them out of jail? They're like, well, I just can't leave them in there. Well, no, they could leave them in there. They just chose not to. And so what the enabling part of that is that message that's being sent to that child is, hey, you get in trouble, I'm going to come and bail you out, and you're not going to have to suffer the consequences for your actions and for your choices. So therefore, you can go out and do it again, and I'll be there to bail you out. And you can do it again, and I'll be there to bail you out. And so that's enabling their addictive behavior because they're not having to face the consequences of their choices. Now, don't get me wrong. If our child calls us up and said, hey, I messed up really bad. I got a DUI last night and I'm sitting in jail. And this is the first time that it's anything like this has ever happened. We don't have any of the other behaviors like money being stolen, lying, personal heirlooms and treasures around the house coming up missing and being, sold for drugs and alcohol. If none of that has gone on and this child or this person just, they made a really poor decision, got a DUI, and they're in jail, if we go bail them out, I don't consider that as enabling. But if it happens again, and then it happens again, and we keep repeating the enabling by going and bailing them out and paying their court costs and letting them keep their vehicle and getting it out of the impound for them, that's enabling because they're not having to have any type of responsibility for their choices and actions. And this gets really hard, and I completely understand. I've had parents that say, well, if I don't get his car back out of impound, how's he going to get to work? The bottom line is it's not your problem. That's their problem. They created the situation. They're the ones that need to learn how to either deal with it and get out of it. But the enabling piece is allowing someone to keep doing what they're doing and not having to face the circumstances or the negative consequences for their choices. And if it worked, A, we wouldn't have huge clinical books on enabling, but two, we wouldn't keep seeing the same repetitive behavior over and over again. If something happens 2 or 3 times, 4 times, it's no longer a mistake. And so every alcoholic and addict, there's an enabler somewhere that's allowing them to keep doing the behaviors that they're doing. Now, eventually an alcoholic and addict does get to the point to where they have nothing left and they're in homeless shelters and they're on the streets. And not that I advocate for those type of programs, not helping that individual, because they definitely need to help, and they're wonderful programs. But if the alcoholic addict who's out on the street with nothing and he continues to get to go and panhandle for money and all that and get the money to go and buy his substances or whatever, even though the person who's giving him the money is doing it out of their heart because they care about another human being, by the strictest definition of enabling, that's still enabling. Now, I'm not saying we don't go help those people. That's not what I'm saying at all, because it's part of what I love to do is go help people that are truly down in that position. But I'm just in a long-winded way trying to give you a better example of what enabling was. I hope that helped out. If not, please ask again, and I can give some more clarity if need be. So the hardest thing that my wife ever had to do for me and my children, unfortunately, my oldest daughter at the time was 16 whenever I finally went to treatment. But my oldest daughter and my wife finally had to tell me no. They weren't doing this anymore. And I tried all the tricks. I tried the guilt, guilt tripping them into, making, trying to make them feel bad for saying no to me. I tried the self-pity, it's not my fault. It was the war's fault. I tried all the tricks that I'd used before, and they stopped working. And I was left with nothing else but to either go get treatment, or I was going to continue to live that life on my own. But the choice I was given is I'm not going to live at home anymore with my wife and my daughters. And my wife was no longer going to support me in watching me destroy myself. And so she gave me two choices. She said, you can either go get help, and we've already made those arrangements, or you can go figure this out on your own. And that was the only two choices I had. And every time I came back with some type of rebuttal or retort or counter offer, she said, no, this is unacceptable. This is my boundary. This is the only thing that I'm going to allow and support. You're either going to go do this on your own, or you're going to go get some help. And here's how we're going to do it. And so once I found out that all my avenues were closed and all my options were done, I literally was stuck with two options. And my wife had to come to a point in her life where she had to be okay, or at least accept that if I chose to go off and do my own thing and it killed me, then that was my choice. And so she had to get to the point to accept that. When she finally got to that point, now the responsibility, the problem was mine. It was no longer everybody else's. The problem was mine. I tell all of my clients that I work with, along with their families and the other people that I work with, all behavior serves a purpose. If it didn't serve a purpose, people wouldn't do it. And so when we see the alcoholic addict throwing the incredible, nut temper tantrums, especially when you're an adult, I call them the adult temper tantrum, even though they're chronologically an adult, but emotionally they're acting like they're 12. When we see that behavior, there's a reason why they're doing it. It's typically because they're not getting what they want. And if we capitulate and give in to them, that's enabling, that's giving them what they want, and they're just going to keep doing that behavior, even if they promise they'll never do it again. I hate to say this, and it's painful because it was told to me straight to my face, but alcoholic and addicts, while they're active in their addiction, their words have no meaning. They cannot be trusted. We are master manipulators, and we will find any weakness and chink in anybody's armor. That's what we do when we're trying to figure out a way to get that next drug or that next alcohol. And it's not personal in the sense that we're doing it because we truly want to go out and hurt the people we love. It's just that in the hierarchy of needs, that drug and that alcohol is taking spot number one over everything. It takes precedence over food, takes precedence over sex, it takes precedence over relationships, it takes precedence over everything. And we will do anything and everything we can to get that number one priority met. And if we have to lie, we'll lie, steal. And I know a lot of you guys out there know exactly what I'm talking about. So the bottom line is all behavior serves a purpose. And when we start understanding what purpose their behavior is serving, then we stop allowing that negative behavior to result in what that alcoholic and addict is trying to accomplish. And I know how painful it is, and I know how ugly it gets. I wish there was a clean, easy, organized way to say, hey, just do this and everything will be fine. It's just, I think, in my personal opinion, not only from having experienced it from the drug addict and the alcoholic side, but experiencing it as a clinician. I have a family member right now who is actively in addiction. They're a family member by marriage only, and they are just absolutely destroying that side of my family. And even though I give my personal opinion to that side of the family on certain things, sometimes they listen, sometimes they don't, but it's just destroying the family. Question?
Yeah, so the question was, you described your situation as, I kept using my tricks, but they no longer worked.
Mm-hmm.
Did you think of them as tricks at the time, or is that how you see things now?
So the question was, I had described that I'd kept using my tricks to get what I want. And at the time I was doing that, did I see them as tricks, or am I only seeing it now because I do what I do now? I definitely did not see them as a trick. I did not have the presence of mind, and it wasn't calculated to the point of like it was some diabolical master plan to trick people. It was just what I did because it worked. And so there wasn't a whole lot of premeditated thought to a lot of my reactionary behaviors. When I would throw my adult temper tantrum when my wife said I couldn't have any more beer, and I blamed her for something, or I would bring up one of my buddies who was killed in the military or something. I didn't think, well, hey, if I make her feel guilty about this, then she's going to let me drink more beer. I just did it because it worked. And it had worked, that type of behavior had worked for so long that that was just how I acted, and that's just how I behaved. It wasn't until I got into recovery myself, and I became a therapist and all that, that I realized what I was doing and why I was doing it. And my wife we've had wonderful talks since then, and she would point things out to me. I remember just going, oh my gosh, I can't believe I used to do that. But I understand why I did it, because at some point in my life, I had done that behavior and it worked. Now, some of these behaviors that I did go all the way back to when I was a kid. And that could have been, I wanted a cookie, and an adult said no. And I threw a fit, and the adult gave me the cookie. But that moment I learned, hey, throw a fit with this adult and I'm going to get the cookie. And so the next time I wanted a cookie, I did it again, and I did it again. And it worked, and it worked, and it worked. I've now just learned that, hey, throw a fit big enough and I'll get a cookie. Now, again, that doesn't mean that's why I became an alcoholic addict, by no stretch of the means. There's plenty of kids, to include my own, that throw a fit when they don't get what they want. But that's the process of how it can work. And so again, another long-winded answer is no, I did not calculate, I wasn't not just sitting there in a very sober presence of mind, calculating my moves as you do like a chess game. It was just kind of reactionary, behavioral, habitual that worked, and I knew it worked. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some things that we do that are very calculated, and they are very calculated. They are very poignant. We have a mission, if you will, what we want to accomplish. And so in those cases, yeah, those are calculated. But in general, that's just how we behave because it has worked at some point in our life. And it's those behaviors that you see, the ugly negative behaviors that keep repeating. I tell my clients, just ask yourself, what is the motivation for their behavior? What is the purpose behind their behavior? And if you can identify what their ultimate goal is, and usually what it is say they want $50 for their rent, and you pretty much know that they're not going to use that $50 for rent, but they throw all kinds of fits and make promises and bring up old stuff and try to make you feel guilty and do all these tricks that they used to do. And then we finally give in and you give them the $50 and all of a sudden their mood changes. And then they get into the conciliatory manner where they're like, I'm sorry, I'm just really stressed out, whatever. You found your purpose. The purpose was they wanted to get what they wanted. And as soon as they got it, the behavior stops. And that's the problem. You've got to stop that. If they need $50 for rent, they'll figure it out because they're able to find the money somehow, some form for their dope and their alcohol. If they want the rent money bad enough, they'll figure out a way to pay the rent. And so you got to help each other identify what the behavior is and what the purpose is for that behavior. And when you can start to do that, then you'll know when to say no, and you'll know when to say, we're not doing this anymore. So I don't want to keep everybody too long. I know it's kind of hard on the web to watch someone talk all the time, but Derek, is there anything else?
Open it up for Q&A, brothers.
Yeah, so I would like to open it up to anybody that's got any questions. Please, I mean this with the deepest sincerity of my heart. If you have any question whatsoever, I try to be as transparent can be. I have told my story and all of its ugly details to large crowds. I have no secrets. There's nothing I'm not afraid to talk about. Please do not hesitate to ask me any question.
How can you learn not to enable, or how can they learn not to enable?
So first things first, by being a part of Parents Helping Parents right now is an amazing thing that you're doing. Please stay plugged into them. There's other organizations out there. They've got, if you Google like codependency support groups or enabling or any of those type of issues on Google, usually some things will pop up for your local area. There's a book I think called Codependent No More. I wish I could remember the author. I apologize, but it's Codependent No More. It's a great book that talks about codependency, and it talks about what a lot of those enabling behaviors are. But first and foremost, staying plugged in with Parents Helping Parents and talking back and forth with each other and other parents that have had a child who's been subject to the disease of addiction and how they dealt with it and how they either came out of it or how they changed their own dynamics as a human being. Look, bottom line is each of us as human beings, we have our own life and we're going to have to live our life. And no matter what the other person does that's in our life, whether it's a child or somebody else, we're still going to have to live a life. And if our whole life is nothing but consumed with what somebody else is doing, and that other person is completely destroying everything, then I have a problem too, because my entire life is now absorbed by one other person. And that's just, when it comes to as far as being self-care and being, healthy emotionally, that's just draining. And if some of you guys are experiencing that now, you know what I'm talking about. So I hope that answered the question. If not, please let Derek know. Any other questions?
There might be. We'll give it a second.
Yeah. Again, if there's any questions, please. There literally is nothing taboo. Want to talk about war? Want to talk about my marriage? Whatever. There's nothing taboo. I promise you.
Yeah, there's one. Let me read it. So the question is, somebody has a 25-year-old child that has moved back home and is refusing any kind of help or treatment. And honestly, the question is, do they ask them to move out or do they kick them out?
So the question was that an individual has an adult child that has recently moved back home with them and is refusing to go do any type of help or anything. And then the question was, do they ask them to leave? So that is a very difficult position to be in, and I see it a lot with the clients that I work with and their families. I think you hit the subject on the nail on the head when you said they're refusing to do anything. If the individual who has the drug and alcohol problem is refusing to do anything to change themselves and to help themselves, if we give them safe harbor, if we give them a place to where they can continue to destroy themselves with the drugs and alcohol, we're not helping them at all. They're going to do the drugs and alcohol, whether they're in your home or whether they're out on the street or whether they're in a homeless shelter or whether they're in something else. They're going to do the drugs and alcohol if they refuse to get any help. So the question really boils down is do you want it in your home, and are you okay with it being in your home? My professional judgment or my personal opinion is that is something that is not acceptable in my home. As I said, I have 3 daughters, and 2 of them still live at home. One is, my oldest, is getting ready to get married, and having drugs and alcohol or the use of it in my home is a boundary that my wife and I have set, and it's unacceptable. And so if one of my children were wanting to, if they got into addiction and they were afflicted with addiction, that would not be allowed in my home. So the option that I would give them would be, I will help you get into treatment and I'll support you 110%. I will help you however I can, as long as you are working towards your own recovery also. If you're not going to work towards your own recovery, then I'm not going to help you kill yourself. And that's all we do by allowing them to take residence in our home without them actually doing anything to get better. And I know that's incredibly harsh. And I know that's terrifying. I talk to family very, very frequently about the fear that they have with their child being out on the streets or not knowing where they're at and going months and months without hearing from them. I know it is devastating and I know it hurts. There's just simply no easy way out of that. The whole idea here is if the individual is going to continue with the drug and alcohol life and they're going to continue to destroy everything around them, I'm not going to be part of it, period. I don't have any control over what another human being does. All I can do is control what I do and what I say, what I think. And so, my answer to you for that question would be, if they're not actively and genuinely, not just verbally, because you'll hear people say all the time, oh, I'm working on it, or, oh yeah, I'm going to do this, or yeah. Again, alcoholics and drug addicts, our words have no meaning when we are active in our addiction. They have no meaning, none. So the only thing to me that is verifiable is what their actual behavior is. Are they actually doing something for their own recovery? And unless that behavior is there, then, you know, my opinion would be is I'm not going to give them safe harbor to just continue to destroy their life and everybody around them. So I hope I danced around that one good enough. I'm sorry. I know it's hard.
Make sure everybody knows somebody commented Melody Beatty is the author of Codependent No More.
Melody Beatty. Derek looked it up. Melody Beatty is the author of Codependent.
Oh, no, that came from a comment.
Oh, sorry.
Somebody else.
The comment. Sorry. Derek is not responsible for that. A viewer commented that Melody Beatty is the author of Codependent No More. So thank you.
And I have another question.
Another question.
This is just for you to respond to this with your thoughts. I've heard that setting a boundary is about trying to make the user do or wait, I'm gonna start there. Sorry. I've heard that setting a boundary isn't about trying to make a user do or not do something, but rather it's about creating a home environment so that people that aren't using feel safe and comfortable.
Absolutely.
Can you react?
Yeah. So great comment. What was put in was that creating a boundary is not about trying to force the active alcoholic addict into modifying their behavior or changing something they're doing. Creating a boundary is about creating a safe environment for yourself, but also anybody else that lives inside the home of that family. And that is absolutely correct. So idle threats say, you know, if you don't stop doing this, then I'm not going to pay your truck payment anymore. Those don't work because they'll figure out a way to manipulate to get that truck payment. A boundary is something to where it's for us. It's not for the alcoholic and addict. And so it might say, and let me redact that for a little bit because the truck payment's a little bit different. And I bring that up because I just had a client that was going through that with here just about a month ago. So you can use the truck payment as a boundary, but it needs to be something like this. I'm paying for your truck. If you choose to not get help or you choose to continue this, I'm taking that truck back and you're not going to be able to use it. I don't care that you won't be able to get to work. I don't care that you won't be able to get around. That's not my problem. It is not acceptable for me to pay for a vehicle that's in my name that you're using in an irresponsible manner by getting your dope, your alcohol, whatever. I'm not going to do that because that is not okay for me. And so that's a good boundary. A boundary of you are not allowed in this home ever again until you choose to get help is another boundary for yourself. It's not a boundary it's not to punish the alcoholic and addict. It's a boundary for yourself because regardless of what that alcoholic addict does, you still have to have a safe place in your home. You still have to live your life. And by creating that boundary of saying you are not welcome inside this safe space, as long as you are actively an alcoholic and addict and you're still doing those behaviors, you're not allowed there. We're not punishing them. We're protecting ourselves because that alcoholic addict is going to do whatever they're going to do. Look at it as like being from Oklahoma, we can use this. Look at it as like a storm shelter. The alcoholic addict is going around like an F5 tornado, tearing everything up everywhere it goes. It's just destruction everywhere it goes. You have to create that storm shelter that tornado is not allowed in. No matter what, that tornado is not allowed in. Not because you don't want to go out. It's just you're not going to violate, you're not going to jeopardize your safe space. So excellent comment. Boundaries are not about punishing the addict. Boundaries are about protecting yourself and the family that's still inside the home, or the extended family that's, you know, on the unfortunate receiving end of the alcoholic addict's negative destructive behavior.
So some follow-up questions. One was just a thank you for your service and your dedication to recovery.
Thank you.
And also a comment that this person was an enabler in their child's addiction and has finally learned to say no and mean it.
Outstanding.
And that's been the biggest blessing they've learned through this entire process.
Outstanding.
Your answer regarding the adult child living at home, would that be different for an 18-year-old or somebody that would have just graduated high school, or for somebody in high school who's trying maybe to figure things out?
So the question was my answer about the adult child moving back home versus the 18-year-old, the young teenager. So I do think that there's some different dynamics there, because I still believe with all of my heart, even though the law says 18-year-old's an adult and they're responsible for all their stuff, cognitively and emotionally, they're still, you know, they still haven't matured all the way through. I think we should approach that one a little bit different. We still have to have boundaries. And if the 18-year-old is destructive, they're violent, they're you know, posing physical harm or things of that nature that could jeopardize yourself or anyone else in your family, then yeah, we may go to the extreme and say, well, you're not welcome here as long as you're in this state, and push them out. If they haven't reached that point yet, and it's just irresponsible behaviors, I don't know if the complete, you know, throw the baby out with the bathwater type mentality is always necessary. This is one of those areas I truly believe that the decision shouldn't be made impulsively, but B, shouldn't be made necessarily alone. This is one of those times where organizations like Parents Helping Parents or any other support groups or things truly needs to be you know, considered, you know, get other people's counsel with this, because there is no clean answer for any of this. So again, I do think that there is some differences when you're dealing with an 18, 19, 20-year-old who's never been out on their own, doesn't know how to do any of the bills, doesn't know how to do any of those types of things. I think it is a little bit different versus someone who's already gone out. They've demonstrated that they can survive on their own. It's just now they're not, because they're steeped in the disease of addiction. So I hope that helps a little bit. Either way, I just can't, I can't emphasize the need for collaboration with other people who are going through the same thing that you are or similar than you are. It is just absolutely paramount. And that is one of the, as I said at the very beginning of this, the most horrific thing about addiction is that it festers and it thrives in darkness and behind closed doors and in shame, and it just gets worse. And truly the only way that we get it out is we do share it, we do bring it to light, and we do that by talking to other people who've been where we've been, you know, your own counselors, your own therapist, you know, something. Don't suffer in silence in the dark with this stuff, because it's one of the worst disease that I know. It affects everybody and everything. It's horrible. So hope that helped a little bit. Another one?
Just another comment that one of the best things this individual has learned when setting boundaries is using the phrase, this is not working for me, and making it about them and not you.
Yeah, excellent. So the comment was one of the best things that this individual learned by working through not enabling or any of that was the statement response to the loved one who's in addiction is saying, you know, hey, what's going on right now is not working for me. It may be working for you, but it's not working for me. And we make that about ourselves and not about the other person. We stop, quote, pointing the finger at the other person and say, hey, this is not okay for me, which goes back around those boundaries. Those boundaries are for me. Hey, this is unacceptable. I can't live this way, and I will not live this way. It's me. If you want to do that, go right ahead, knock yourself out, go live your life that way. But this isn't okay for me, and I'm not going to allow this to happen for me. So excellent point.
Are contracts helpful for younger people, like an 18-year-old or someone in high school, maybe like a behavioral contract with parents or family?
So the question was, are contracts helpful? I've never done a behavioral contract with any of my kids. I never had one done to me when I was a kid. I'll tell you from my personal experience, I have had a couple young clients who are 18, 19 years old who came to my facility and their parents did write contracts. And in the most part, the contracts I didn't see work. Again, this goes back to addicts and alcoholics their words not having any meaning. And somebody who's signing the contract is giving you their word that, hey, I'm going to have, what I say I'm going, agreeing to. So the contract in that case, and I'm particularly thinking of one client in particular, the contract, as he and I were talking, the contract, he built a lot of resentments towards his parents for it. Not saying that that's going to happen in every case, but just for this particular individual. What I do say is, instead of a contract, write out a list of things that are acceptable and things that aren't acceptable. And then let that individual choose what they're going to do. And so if I if I write out a list of saying, hey, these are the things that are acceptable to me, and these are the things that are unacceptable to me. Should you choose to do these things that are unacceptable to me, here are the negative consequences. And just leave it at that. So it's not necessarily a contract where they sign it and they say, okay, whatever. It's just laying out the line. If you do X, here's what's going to happen. If you do Y, here's what's going to happen with that. And so just lay it out the line there. Give that person back their problem. It's their problem. Give it back to them and let them choose what they're going to do. Any more questions?
Yeah, final question offer, man. Just offer it up for any final questions and we'll kind of
wrap up. So got just a couple of minutes left. If anyone has any more questions, feel free to ask. I hope it's been helpful in some little way. I applaud all you guys so much for tuning in and for getting connected. Please, if this is your first time, please stay connected. Please stay connected. Please stay connected. I promise you, the disease of addiction loses its strength when everybody's together. When we try to do this on our own or behind closed doors, it's too powerful for all of us. I mean, even as clinicians collaborate with each other, and we have our own groups where we help each other out because it's too big for even just one of us. So please keep doing what you're doing.
All right, man. I'm going to take the mic from you. Wrap us up.
Thank you guys very much. I sure appreciate it.
So just to close this out real quick, I want to make sure that if you're not following us on Facebook, do that. That's where we post about our current upcoming meetings, about our live streams, about everything that's happening with the organization, at Parents Helping Parents Inc. On Facebook. And I also want to encourage you, like Brian said, stay plugged in. Go to our website, parentshelpingparents.info. Look there. There's lists of resources. There's suggested readings. There's information about meetings. There's a phone number that you can anonymously text and get in touch with one of our parents if you've got additional questions or you need help. So the resources are there. We're ready and willing to help you, and we really appreciate everybody tuning in for our live stream. Thank you, Major, for being here. Oh, yeah.
So,
I forgot. You host a radio show, man. I should have mentioned that when I introduced you. Do it.
So just real quick, I host an internet radio show every Friday at 12:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. And so it's called Surrender to Win. And it's where I talk about all kinds of mental health stuff, but I talk a lot about addiction. I've talked about codependency, enabling, and all that stuff. You can go to my Facebook page, Surrender to Win Facebook page, and all of my previous shows are listed on that. You can go to Apple iTunes or the podcast, and you can search Surrender to Win, Apple Podcast on there. It's on SoundCloud, but I do it for free. It's something I do just for the community. And I talk a lot about some of the things that we've talked about. So please feel free if you have any other questions, I can be reached there as well, or Derek can get a hold of me as well. So again, thank you guys. I wish you guys all the best of luck. Hang in there, and just, we'll all together, try to address this problem. So Derek, you got anything else?
No, just let him know there's a lag on our live stream. So I'm going to mute the mic and we're going to wrap up, but we're just going to let the video run for 2 or 3 minutes to make sure the live stream
Okay.
basically gets wrapped.
Derek says there's a lag on the live stream, so he's just going to mute it all, but let it run for a few more minutes afterwards just to make sure. So thank you guys.